Drew Mitchell. I am the Director of Physical Literacy for Canadian Sport for Life. I want to welcome you all here today on this webinar supported by Parks and Rec Ontario and the Ontario Sport and Recreation Community Fund supporting the project that Parks and Rec Ontario and Canadian Sport for Life are doing together. Today we're going to talk about play, physical literacy assessment of youth, and Stacy, you may want to check your computer to make sure you have sound. You may be muted on your level. What we're going to do is we're just going to talk very briefly a little bit about physical literacy and then go right into the assessment components of that. If there's any questions, what I'd appreciate is if people could just tap them into the text box, and what we'll do is we'll try and answer them potentially on the fly, or we'll pick spots throughout the session to be able to do that, and then we'll sort of sum things up at the end if we do miss anything on the fly. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just get started and move on to our topic of the day. So what we want to do is we really want to build more confident movers. At the end of the day, confident movers tend to move more often, and really that's what we want to try and achieve. So when, as humans, we are born to move, and we know with movement that you do develop a better brain, better muscle, better bone, better heart, better social life, better productivity, a whole bunch of better. There's no doubt about that. The research is really quite solid around that. There's no real disputing that, but I don't know if it is because we're in Canada or this is part of the Western philosophy. The good news story doesn't seem to be compelling enough for people to convince them that movement is something that they should be doing on a more regular basis. We know today that we have a different landscape. Unstructured play is pretty much extinct. It's gone by the way of the dinosaur. There's the challenge around that is that neighborhoods, communities have changed a lot. The built environment is different. People's comfort level around public safety has changed. It really does make it tough for parents to feel confident to be able to let the kids go out and walk, roam, as we all, I'll sort of lend to my age a little bit, but roam like we did when we were young. So it means that we have to be focusing on things a little differently when it comes to providing opportunities for people to move and to be engaged, and also to develop the movement confidence to move more. We see playgrounds, again, part of the built environment, or can sometimes be empty. Kids sometimes don't even know how to use the playgrounds, and so it is quite a different environment. Walking to school is something that's pretty much gone by the wayside. In a single generation, it really has been eradicated. You see the stream of minivans pulling into the elementary school, and kids being punted out the door as they're being dropped off. And part of it's a convenience thing in our society. Parents have decided that it's just easier to do it this way, but there are repercussions to those actions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, the classic "come home when the streetlights come on, never to be heard again." It really, hollering, neighborhood hollering is also gone by the wayside. But just to reflect on the walking to school, there's been research done around. So what does that mean? What is the impact of that physiologically? So with one single day of walking to school, it's around 2,000 steps a day gone. So for a little guy, pictured here with the backpack and the lunch in his hand, that's around 100 calories a day. 200 school days a year. It does add up physiologically to lend to not having that energy expenditure. And I would say even more significantly, the experiences that one has in walking to school every day and having that social engagement with your friends, all the decision making that goes on to cross the street, to go here, to make these decisions, bringing this level of independence that tends to come in this type of environment. So we really are working in a different space than we did 10, 20 years ago. And so we have to be very cognizant of that, and we have to be very aware of that. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, it needs to be the way it was 20, 30 years ago. It's not going to be. So we need to be smarter, and we need to look at different ways to do that. Just one last piece we're going to do here before we move on to assessment is just talk a little bit about where physical literacy fits into the skill-based literacy space. So we know very clearly with literacy and numeracy that there is a step-by-step skill-based teaching approach and learning approach that goes on with these literacies. So we know with literacy, you learn your ABCs, you can start to put together words and form sentences, and from there you can start to construct various things. You can do papers, you can do paragraphs, and maybe even one day create a document like the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So there is a step-by-step process that's learned by the individual, and it's very purposeful. Numeracy, the same thing. You have your numbers. From there, you can create fractions and equations. Go on to engineering school, get sponsored by Red Bull, and jump from space. Of course, that would be a very cool ending, but that's just one of the many things you can do when you know numeracy and you are literate in that area. Likewise, with music, if you're going to be able to know your do, re, mi's, your scales, your scores, you can go on and become a famous musician somewhere along the way. No different with physical literacy. Your movement vocabulary, so your fundamental movement skills, are your ABCs, your 1, 2, 3s, your do, re, mi's. That's what they are. They are the building blocks. And so FMS, fundamental movement skills, and having a large bucket of skills is really important. Just like it is really important to have a full and rich vocabulary in literacy and being able to read and understand and comprehend, it's no different with movement. You need to be able to move and have a diverse and deep and wide movement vocabulary, and you want to sequence those skills together so that you can do tasks and maybe one day perform in the Swan Lake or something, some sport activity, or just being active for life. The reality is that physical literacy is a learned skill. And we know with other literacies, some people pick them up quicker than others. And so I think sometimes we make the assumption that it's innate, it's just something that's inside you. No. What it is that some people just are quicker learners with that type of literacy than others. And that's just a reality. So you've seen those kids that actually take 1 or 2 tries and they've got it. On the other hand, you see those kids that need a whole bunch of tries before they actually start to feel a little bit more confident and develop that competence to move better. So we need to be able to provide those opportunities for those kids to have those tries, to have those opportunities to learn how to hop properly, to learn how to throw properly, and not just in one context, but in a whole bunch of contexts. So it's really important that we do provide those as part of programming, both structured and unstructured, that we provide in the day-to-day delivery of what we do. And we know very clearly that if we don't have those fundamental skills, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, the do, re, mi's, the FMSs, your development as an individual will stop. So we need to be very cognizant of that as we move forward. So just wanted to bring this up as the latest definition that's come from the Canadian Consensus Group this year, 2015, and coming from the International Physical Literacy Association, that physical literacy is the motivation, confidence, physical competence, knowledge, and understanding to value and take responsibility for engagement in physical activities for life. So in essence, it's being able to be a confident mover and have an understanding and a knowledge of why and how you're moving. At the end of the day, we know that with confident movers, they will tend to be motivated to move more often. And they will have a better understanding of why they're moving and how they're moving. And so it's really important that we embed this in the type of programming, the type of learning that we provide for children, youth, adults, doesn't matter, because physical literacy is over the lifespan. We all need to be aware that you're developing physical literacy on a daily basis. It's not like it has an endpoint. It is over the life course. So physical literacy assessment. So if we're going to be, physical literacy being a relatively new term, and just to be very, very clear, physical literacy is different than physical activity, okay? That's different than fitness. And so if I can give the spectrum for you, physical literacy is an outcome. You're developing physical literacy through you're developing better physical literacy from developing better movement vocabulary and sequencing and moving on a more regular basis. You achieve that by doing physical activity. And if you do physical activity on a regular basis, you will get physically fit. So they are not one and the same thing. They're really connected. So it's important to understand that physical literacy, physical activity, and physical fitness are three different concepts. Okay? So why would you measure? Today we're going to talk about why we're going to measure. We're going to talk more specifically around the play tools that have been created and are now they've been out for about 2.5 years now, and we'll talk a little bit about what they are. We're going to probably spend most of the time on how to use them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the practical delivery that's going on through current projects. So if there's any questions before we get going, just fire them into the text box. We'll go from there. I'll deal with them on the fly. So why would you measure to start with? Well, there's lots of different reasons to measure. We've listed some of them here, probably most of them here. And research is clearly one of the main things. And sometimes for all, probably most of you or many of you who either are working on the front line or are getting people to work on the front line, you're either in the management level or you're at the policy level, research is in many cases, is the thing that validates why you're doing what you're doing. So we need to have that always as part of what we're doing to ensure that what we're doing is a valid concept, that it makes sense, and that there is proof of concept. Program evaluation is a very important thing. Is your program being effective? How do you know that? Just thinking that your program is effective is generally not good enough. So program evaluation is very important. We find with the play tools that program evaluation is a really, we spend most of our time in this particular area, and I'll talk more about that as we move along. In education, a lot of the focus can be around assessment for learning or assessment of learning. So these two concepts are definitely there. We need to evaluate where the kids are at or where they're going. Play can be used as a teaching tool to help teach the fundamental movement skills. Again, knowing where the individuals are at helps you better design the components that you're going to deliver. Population surveillance is another piece where you want to get a general idea of how the population is doing. Engagement and awareness, you want to improve people, you want to engage them around this particular topic, and you want to increase their awareness around that topic. So measurement is a good way to do that because it helps them reflect on what's going on. You're probably wondering why marketing is there. What we're finding is some programs in the country are actually using assessment as a way to value add to their program because they're actually doing measurement pre and post the program, and it helps them better program deliver. Hence, people see a greater value in that program and want to sign up for that program. So it can be a marketing tool. And then normative standards. If you want to gather data and have normative standards on how portions of the population are developing, it can be used for that as well. So there's a number of areas of why you can measure, and it is important to know why, whenever you're going to use measurement, why you're going to do it. What is the reason for that? So with physical literacy assessment, we at Canadian Sport for Life, we feel pretty strongly that it should include more than just the movement skills, and that would include the movement repertoire and the competence to move. So that would be in its most simple form. That would be sort of the assessment of the fundamental movement skills that a person has. We feel it's also important, as per the consensus definition, it should also include an assessment of confidence, a potential assessment of movement in different environments, how much participation is going on, what sort of comprehension of terms and what's going on does the individual have, and how motivated are they. Okay, so that's an important piece to have. It's good information to have because, again, it gives you a more holistic approach or a more full approach to you finding out what's going on with that individual and then designing the appropriate program or outcome that whatever you're going to use the assessment for. So the Physical Literacy Assessment for Youth is located at play.physicalliteracy.ca. And for those of you that are online right now, you can certainly pop up the website if you like, and go and poke around, but lots of information there. The play tools were developed at the University of Manitoba, and they are deployed by us at Canadian Sport for Life. They were originally designed for a research context, but what we have found in practical delivery is that they are a really good fit for program evaluation and helping people better understand the effectiveness of the current program they're delivering. And I'll talk more about that when we get on the other side of what is assessment and how to assess. We have found that the tools are very good around reliability and being able to use them. They have strong validity. They're quite easy to interpret, especially if you practice. And they are pretty sensitive to change, which I think is important. I think when you are doing any measurement, you want to be able to have a certain level of sensitivity to be able to pick up those finer nuances sometimes. And probably most importantly is that they don't display a ceiling effect, which means that an individual can actually top out, can hit the roof, and still have a ways to go, but the tool itself doesn't allow to assess beyond that. The nature of the play tools is it is an inclusive tool, and it is engaging of everybody in the population. Now, we'll talk more specifically around persons with a disability and the context of that a little later, but the idea here is that we feel the play tools can fit pretty much everybody in the population, and I'll explain more about that as we move along. So the play tools suite is built up of a number of tools. There's some very focused assessment tools. The Play Fun and Play Basic tools are assessment of fundamental movement skills and other components, and we'll spend a chunk of time on that today, most specifically the Play Fun tool, which assesses 18 skills and tasks. It's not exhaustive of all of the fundamental movement skills out there, but it's reasonably representative of giving a pretty good idea, a pretty good snapshot of what an individual looks like in being able to move and what sort of movement ability they have. The Play Basic tool was created as either a starting point or a more snapshot approach. It's 5 of the 18 skills and tasks. It allows, obviously, it's a much shorter assessment component. It can help people, if you're assessing a lot of people, it might be an easier way to actually deliver it to that many people. And so it is a subset. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. The Play Coach, Play Parent, Play Self tools are all questionnaire-based. And what they do is with Play Coach, and the Play Coach tool can apply to a coach, a teacher, an instructor, anybody who's providing instruction or leadership to a child or an individual. And basically what they do is they give their feedback on what they feel the physical literacy status of that individual is. So it's their assessment, their personal feeling around that. The parent, same thing. Play Parent is an assessment of their child. And then the Play Self is a tool that's actually used by the individual to assess themselves. Where are they at? And for any of you that have read the consensus document, this particular tool really does fit quite nicely into the effective domain of the consensus document. And so I think it's again, when we're talking about more than just the fundamental movement skills, it's important that we are measuring these other components other than just the physical. Play inventory is an inventory of activities, about 100 activities, pretty extensive. And the idea is the individual can check off, if you give them an idea of the last 3 months, the last 6 months, the last year, what type of activities have you done over that time frame, they can check off and you get an idea of how diverse a movement opportunity this person has had. If they have check off one thing, and they may be doing it a lot, but they're kind of on a single track. So it just gives you more information. These are assessment tools that give you information to help you make decisions and help the individual make decisions on what next steps might look like. And if you go online, all of these tools are in PDF format on the website. And on the website itself, we have actually built the ability for you to actually enter your data for Play Fun, Play Basic, and Play Self right into the database that is part of the website. And you can actually print a report. So if you're doing a class, if you're doing an after-school group, if you're doing a sports team, you're doing a rec program group, what you can do is you can register as a leader, enter your participants, and then you can enter their data. And what it does, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but it provides a numerical value, 0 to 100, of where they stand. So you can benchmark their current status, and then you can monitor it over time. And it helps you plan, based on where their progress is, the best way to program. So it can be quite a useful tool for you if you want. I'll talk more about that later on. So this is just an example of the Play Coach questionnaire. You can see participant's name, I coach, so on and so forth. But if you get into the real meat of it, it's in the questionnaire section. So judge the ability of the participant based upon an ideal athlete being excellent. That's the sort of spectrum. And then there's a 5-point scale: poor, fair, good, very good, excellent. And then 1 to 7 with some subsection questions in there. But as an example, question 1 is confidence to participate in sport and physical activity. And this is your opinion of the individual. Do you feel where their confidence is? How do you rate it? And then movement competence, it's gain. So that, again, you're talking more about their inclusion up here, and sometimes their how they feel about things, what your perception of how they feel. And then down here you get down into some of the movement competence. So how you feel that they are doing with the actual skills themselves. So again, it provides information that all of those pieces, the suite of tools, almost gives you a 360-degree view of the individual, which can be very valuable to be able to gather information and to better figure out the best way to program or deliver programming to this individual. Play Parent, again, a little different structure for this. So again, showing a spectrum of not physically literate to perfect physical literacy, giving them an idea that is the spectrum we're talking about. Assess your child using the table below. 3-point scale here. So confidence, you can see confidence, motivation, same first 2 questions right off the bat. Ability to use feet to kick, so it's again how sort of the effective component, and then down here into the physical component. And again, it provides information. What we're finding now with this particular tool is programs that actually send this home with the child, if it's a program for children or youth, and the parents are looking at it. Even if you don't get the information back from the parent, the idea is this starts to educate the parent a bit more around the sort of stuff that they may want to think a little bit more about for their Johnny or Janie. And because I think there's a large group of parents who don't necessarily understand what physical literacy is and the importance of all these different movement things and how their children feel about that, which is a very important component. And then, of course, we have the Play Self tool here, and this is the individual's own opportunity to be able to assess how they figure they stand. I'm going to have a slide later on towards the end that talks about the delivery of the Play Self tool in the province of Ontario and some interesting results we got from that. So I'll wait till we get there. But again, how good are you at doing some sports and activities, and this talks about environment in the gym, on the playground, on the snow, a 5-point scale there. What do you think about doing sports and activities, and it gets down to how they feel about things, where's their confidence. We even have a worry questionnaire, number 13. I worry about trying a new sport or activity, so we want to figure out where they're at. And then the last part is around the context of the 3 literacies: literacy, numeracy, and physical literacy, and their context in school, at home, and with friends. And I'll talk more about that later on, and give you some feedback from fairly large engagement that we had in Ontario. The inventory, I talked about approximately 100. I think it's 99. You can see the different activities: curling, cheerleading, skipping. It can really use for there's a large group of activities. Gardening. You can see the whole spectrum picked up here, right? It's not just children and youth. It can be adults. It can be anybody. But it gives you an idea of sort of the diversity of movement that may be going on with this individual. Now, this is the play fun form, and we're going to talk. This is where we're probably going to spend most of the time, or most of the remaining time, on today. And I want to talk about its basic setup. So down the x-axis, we have 1 to 18 skills and tasks. So it starts off with running and movement with your legs. So we call this locomotion. Okay. So locomotion would basically be from 1 to 8. Okay, with running tasks, and then there'd be different movement tasks after that, what we would call your fundamental movement skills: skipping, hopping, jumping, galloping, and then we move into upper body object manipulation, so overhand throw, strike with a stick, one-handed catch, hand dribble, and then we go to lower body object manipulation, so that's kick a ball, dribble a ball with your foot, and then we get into balance walk, and then we have 2 sort of life skills pieces: drop down on the ground, get back up, and lift and lower. So these are, again, we feel these 18 skills and tasks are quite representative of the type of movement, land-based movement. I need to be very clear on that. This is land-based movement, so this is not in the water, this is not in the air, this is not on snow and ice, this is land-based movement. And so what we have is, for each of the 18, we have a competence scale here that is broken into 2 sections: developing and acquired. So with developing, what we have is the skill is not formed yet. It's still very much in its infancy. It can be very, very green, very early in the initial stage, or it can be now moving into emerging, okay? And then from there, once you get across that sort of midline there into acquired, we now have the skill, and we're starting to refine that skill. So you're, starting out, you've moved up to competent, and then you've reached proficient. So we're really looking to, this whole spectrum is we're moving to mastery of that particular skill. Okay, so I'm going to show you another. This is called a visual analog scale. I'm going to show a better breakdown of this in a couple more slides, but I wanted to give you an idea of what this looked like on the sheet itself. We also have 2 sets of flags: confidence flag, comprehension flag. So when you're assessing somebody with the confidence flag, what we want to do here is we just want to get a basic idea of whether Johnny or Janie is feeling confident with doing whatever they're doing. And so let's just say, we're skipping, number 5. So with skipping, what I want to do is I say to Johnny or Janie, I'd like you to skip from here to there. I'd like you to skip from here to there. Go. And you know right away, just looking at Johnny or Janie, whether they're confident or not. And the idea here is for you as the assessor to be able to make a check mark here if you see that their confidence is not very high. So they've got deer in the headlights, they're a little, you can tell very clearly that they're not very confident. You would make a check at that particular skill where you saw that lack of confidence. Otherwise, you leave it blank. Okay? If they seem fine, they respond, they're moving to the best of their ability, that's fine. So what this is just information for you to know more about your, well, if you want to call it that, a client or customer or whoever you're working with. Okay? It just gives you more information. With comprehension, there's a bit more detail to it. So if I give a simple command like I just did for skipping, I'd like you to skip from here to there, I'd like you to skip from here to there, and they don't move, then I may have to prompt them. I may have to give them an additional command, and in doing so, I would probably indicate there a check mark to say I had to prompt them because they didn't quite comprehend what I meant. Likewise, when you get reasonably good at this, you can do 2 or 3 kids at a time, especially with all the locomotion skills. So I may have a couple of kids hopping together or jumping together in a line, 2 or 3 at a time. And if you get one who waits, well, just, the other 2 start moving, and the other one waits, turns sideways, sees what they're doing, and then goes, that's mimicking. And that's a lot how kids learn. That's a big part of how kids learn. So it's a big component there. But you just want to get an idea that you want to check that off, because Johnny or Janie, who looked over that, didn't know what the term what you gave them meant. So that's part of their comprehension. And then, of course, you may have to get to the point where you're actually describing in more detail and or even demo the actual skill. The whole idea is not to do this. So the idea isn't to demonstrate the skill and then have them do it, because they're just going to mimic what you do. You're not going to find out what they know. The idea is you give them simple command. I'd like you to skip from here to there. I'd like you to gallop from here to there. I'd like you to, I'd like you to kick the ball from you to me. Very simple commands that are very clear and concise on what you want them to do. But if they don't understand that, then their comprehension of the terms may not be there yet. And so, again, the reason you check any of these areas in comprehension off is so that you know that in your lesson planning and or your program delivery, you need to have more emphasis on understanding the terms. So again, it's just information for you. Okay, really important that we're clear on that. So this is a little different look at that same 4-point scale, if you want to call it, or 4-quadrant scale. So we've talked about the competence section, and this is what we call a visual analog scale. It's divided into 4 quadrants: initial, emerging, competent, and proficient. I talked earlier about no ceiling effect. Okay, and the idea here is that on the far part, of the very initial part of initial, the very beginning part of initial, that's no skill at all. Okay, no skill at all. If I move all the way to the far right-hand side, the other side of proficient, that's best in the world. So no skill at all, best in the world. That encompasses everybody. So hence no ceiling effect. Okay? It's important when you're using the scale. This is not an age-related scale. Okay? So the idea is you may have a 9 or 10-year-old who's moving quite well, and you go, wow, and you put them up really high and proficient. It's probably not appropriate because they probably have a lot more development to go, and they're, I know for a 9 or 10-year-old, you may be quite impressed at how well they're moving, but they may still just be at the competent or the low part of proficient. So you need to be cognizant of the fact that this scale encompasses everybody from birth to death. And so it is important that you put them in an appropriate spot on that scale. The other thing I want you to think about is that we use a 0 to 100 millimeter scale numbering system in this, but it's in the backdrop. Because if we used it right on the scale, it would be a numerical scale. It wouldn't be a visual analog scale. And what a numerical scale does is it biases you. You start to look at a number, I think they're a 65, or I think they're a 55. And what this does is this actually gives you a better idea here. So if we use the midline right here in between developing and acquired, what you need to do is first is if I ask somebody to skip, I'd like you to skip from here to there, I'd like you to skip from here to there. And if you feel they have the skill, then you start right away on this side of the line. So, okay, yep, the first thing I say is, okay, they know how to skip. How well do they know how to skip? Okay, when I saw it, it was pretty good. So, it's probably, they're pretty competent. So I think I'd probably put them maybe halfway along competence and put your check or your X there. Okay, and there'll be an example. I'll just give you an idea of what that might look. So here you can see this. We've just put the numbers in there for you to look at to get an idea. But I put the X right here in competent, and that may relate to about 63 as an example if you're looking at the numerical scale here. Okay, and while the other child just has the skill, they're just over the 50% line, so I put the X there. Okay, Just wanted to give you an idea of what that means. So the whole idea of this visual analog scale is to find out where they are with each of the 18 and or 5 skills, depending on whether you're doing play fun or play basic. So again, the first 2 quadrants represent the skill developing, okay, initial and emerging. So they haven't got the skill yet. Now the nice thing about the program and the workbook that supports this and the website that supports this is that for each of the initial, emerging, or each of the 18 skills and tasks, there's a rubric that describes what initial looks like, what emerging looks like, what competent looks like, and what proficient looks like. So for each of the 18 skills and tasks, it breaks it down for things you should be looking for. Okay, so that rubric is there. And the way this rubric works is it's not a hard and fast. It's what we call a holistic rubric, which means you may have, as an example, you may have 4 of the 5 components of initial and 2 of the 5 of emerging. So that might move you just into emerging just a bit. You don't have to have all of these in initial dealt with first before you can move into emerging. So that's the way we want you to look at it, is that you have the ability to move them on the scale because they've got tenets of this and some of this as well. So most of the initial and some of the emerging. That doesn't leave them initial. It could be they're just stepping into emerging. Likewise with any of the other 4 quadrants as you're moving along. Okay, so if you take, when you're looking at somebody, you have the halfway line, the 50% line, the 50 millimeter line, whatever way you want to call that. I look first is, do they have the skill? No, they're still developing. Or if they have the skill, they've acquired the skill, where are they at with the skill? Okay, so developing the skill and then really refining the skill once they've acquired it. So that's the visual analog scale is very, very strongly scientifically supported and validated. It's used quite often. And what it is more than anything else is it's as you become more proficient, as you practice, it really does help you you develop a really good eye with doing this, especially if you are a programmer yourself, if you are somebody that's delivering. And one of the real strengths of the play tools that I think that I want to take a moment and describe for you is that put in the hands of the actual person delivering the program, it's a very powerful tool. Because what happens is that if you're delivering programs and activities or sports or practices or whatever it is you're delivering, what it does is it allows for you at various points throughout the year, depending on how often you are evaluating or assessing or whatever term you would like to use, what it does is it gives you feedback on where the individual's at. So you may, time 1, maybe your benchmarking time, where I'm getting an idea of where Johnny or Janie is at with their skills. And then what you do is you take that information away and it helps you better program because not only did you see it, but you have the data to validate what you saw. So, and the beauty of it is not only do you have the data, but you also saw it. You saw how they moved. You saw their face. You saw how confident they were. You saw how lacking in confidence they were. You saw how whether they were comprehending or not. It helps you a ton as a programmer and as a deliverer of information to be able to also have the assessment tool in your hands as well. Versus if somebody else came in, did the assessment, gave you the information, and you're supposed to act on that information. It's almost a disconnection. So we find with this particular process that it's been very powerful at influencing the way people develop their programming and develop their delivery of programs to individuals. So whether you're a teacher, whether you're an after-school leader, a coach, rec programmer, doesn't matter. Whatever it is you're doing. So it really can be quite powerful. As I pointed out on the Play Fun tool, the competence section, you would indicate whether it is low, okay? And actually, I need to take out the or not because you actually don't put you don't actually put anything in there. You put a check if it's low, leave it blank if they're okay. And with the comprehension section, how much explanation do they need to perform the task? I find the majority of kids, believe it or not, are pretty good. They do comprehend reasonably well. There's a couple in there, and I'm sure, having seen the Play Fun tool, you're probably wondering, what the heck is galloping? And what is drop to the ground and get back up? So some of them are a little bit more complicated or are terms that you're not sure of. So with galloping, just to give you an idea, It can also be called the side gallop. Your one foot is pointed forward, your back foot, so you're offset. So one foot's pointing forward, you're turned sideways. You have the back foot sort of turned perpendicular to the front foot, and you're dragging it along. So you're kind of shuffling along. And what it is, it's actually the precursor to the side shuffle. It is a pre-fundamental movement skill to the side shuffle that you would use in many sports. So, so it is an important component. Drop down on the ground and get back up is exactly what it is. And again, in sport or in life, this happens. You fall down, you got to get back up. So it is one of those life skill components. And then all the other skills that are with this. So the visual analog scale is set up in such a way to make it relatively easy for you to look at Johnny or Janie when they're doing their skill, when you have them in your mind's eye or in your eye for that moment, and for you to make that assessment. Do they have the skill or not? If they don't have the skill, where are they on that part of the scale? And if they do have the skill, where are they on that part of the scale? You would make that X or check, move on. Okay? So it's pretty straightforward from that perspective. Again, this just gives you an idea of how the numbers could potentially line up to the different portions or different quadrants of the scale. You don't see the numbers ever in any of the tools, so you don't see it in the Play Fun form. You've seen that, or the Play Basic form. What we do, though, is that when you enter the information in the database, we actually have what we call a slider. So you'd see the same scale, initial, emerging, competent, proficient. You grab the slider, you move it over to where you put the X, you stop it, and what that does is wherever you stop it, that drops the appropriate value for where you've stopped it into the database. So when you print a report from the database, it's out of 100, 0 to 100. And so you start to see where the kids are at, and again, over time, longitudinally, you could get an idea of their progress over time and monitor that progress and help plan whatever programming you're doing to better enhance their progress as you're moving forward. Okay? No questions have popped up. Here's the website itself. Just wanted to give you an idea of the website. Basically, as I said before, you go in and you can register. You register as a leader. Once you register as a leader, you can go in and you can add your participants on the fly. You can put them all in the database at one time. The database or the website only asks for, actually you don't even have to add their full name. You can have a nickname or initials, whatever you like. They get a unique identifier in the database. And then from there you can enter the data for Play Fun, Play Basic, or Play Self. So it's quite powerful, and it can really help you track your kids over time, depending on whether you're, again, at the director or the manager level, and determining the sort of tools you want your staff to use, or if you're on the front line yourself and you're using these tools. These tools are there to support you in what you're doing. So we have a couple of projects on the go right now. We have the Play Research Project that Canadian Sport for Life is doing in partnership with Brock University and 8 community recreation departments. And I see Lori Mambala is here, is sitting in and listening from St. Catharines. She's one of the partner communities and has done, I think, an excellent job at incorporating play into what they're doing. But the goal here is to help build the capacity of a community to be able to use assessment tools to assess physical literacy and affect programming appropriately. And that's the whole idea, is so it's building knowledge and awareness, but it's also building capability. And so that project's on the go right now. It'll end March 2016. This is an OSRCF supported project, and it is great. I'm actually in Aurora on Sunday, delivering a play workshop there from 12 to 4:30 in Aurora. And then I'm actually in Sudbury on Monday and Tuesday, delivering 2 play workshops, one in the evening, 5 to 9, and the other one the next day, 1 to 5. And so there's a number of workshops that are sort of on the go in the province right now that are going on. And then there's other communities that are doing they're either bringing play into train their leaders, train their instructors, train their coaches. Various groups are finding that this is quite good. We've also found that some groups are very good at being able to go to the website because we have instructional videos on how to use the tools. So everything I talked about today on how to use your visual analog scale, how to use all the different tools, are explained in short little video vignettes in our video resource section of the website. So if you're unsure, if you step away from this today and you weren't quite sure what I said or what I meant, you can go in and actually listen to Dr. Dean Kriars, who created the tools, talk in short little sound bites around how the tools work, how to best apply them, and how to most effectively use them in whatever programming you do. Another project that we're doing with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport is a project called My Personal Best. It was a project initiated as part of the Pan Am Games, and it continues on today. We're now moving into phase 3 of the project. So this is phase 1 of the project, where we actually had the after-school leaders provide assessment in January and May of 2014, and some interesting results from that. When I talked earlier about the power of having assessment in your hands as a programmer, a lot of after-school leaders really reported a substantial increase in their own physical literacy knowledge in having gone through that process, in actually practically learning what to do. And so I think it made a big difference for them. And just to give you an idea of some of the data that came out of there, so there's about 425 ministry-supported after-school sites in the province. 268 participated in the first round. 5,183 did play self in time A and time B, and 4,779 did play fun in time A. There is a bit of a transit nature to after school, so you can see that there was over 7,000 kids did play self in time A, but just over 5,000 we captured both of them, both assessment periods. So some interesting stuff came out of this particular assessment, which was very it's worrisome more than anything else. First of all, we found that the physical literacy status of Ontario children is not particularly high, but even more worrisome. So this particular graph, this is motor competence, males and females, males versus females, and so just to interpret this for you, this is the 18 skills and tasks turned upside down. So lift and lower is on the top, run and square is on the bottom. But you can see everything to the right of the vertical line here means that boys have improved more than girls, or are better than girls in this particular population that was assessed. So you can see, other than skipping, galloping, and a little bit of hopping, the boys were quite a bit more dominant than the girls. And so in that first initial study, what we found was there's a bit of a wedge that starts to happen in about grade 4 or grade 5. It's around that time, around that age, where girls start to have their competence not improving at the same level as boys. Now, we're actually doing more investigation into this. Our theory is that what's happening is that girls are not getting as much time on task as boys. And what I mean by that is that as a culture, we tend to treat girls differently than boys when it comes to activity. You may have all have your own experiences around this. But so typically, a girl would come up and say, I'm not very comfortable in doing this activity, and we'd say, that's okay, you can go down and sit over there and not participate in the activity. If a boy comes up, we would typically say, well, we really want you to participate, you need to go back there and do it. And so culturally, we have this sort of gender imbalance that goes on, and because of that, girls are not getting as much time on task. And when they don't develop their competences level, they don't develop their confidences level. It all starts to spiral down a bit. And so what we're finding, especially into their teen years, is that girls are not as confident movers as boys. That doesn't mean that there aren't girls who are confident movers. We're talking about as a population or a portion of the population. Girls as a population are not as confident movers as boys. And it's a problem. And so we need to be focusing in on how are we delivering our programming, and how are we addressing this gender inequity that's going on between boys and girls. Now with the Play Self tool, we found out some really interesting stuff. So you may have remembered when I showed you the Play Self tool at the bottom, there was reading, writing, or literacy, numeracy, and physical literacy, and in school, at home, and with friends. So we asked the kids the question, how do you value reading and writing in school? Well, they value it very high, of course, school. And as adults, we value that high as well, so they pick up on that. How do you value reading and writing at home? Not so much. And how do you value reading and writing with my friends? Well, definitely not so much, much lower. How do you value math with you at school? Quite high, actually higher than numeracy, because it's one of the only places we really do math is at school. And how do you value it at home? With family, not so much. And with friends, even lower than numeracy. So again, it's not such a priority. Now, interestingly enough, how do we value movement in school? We value it lower than numeracy and literacy because the adults have done that. So, we certainly don't value it as high in school because the adults don't seem to value it as high. How do you value it at home with family and family? Higher than numeracy and literacy. And here's the kicker. How do you value movement with your friends? Well, super high. It's important. It is the social engagement component for kids. It really is. Movement is, they're almost screaming to have more movement. Give me more movement. So this is something we all need to listen to as we move forward in our practice. So it is important that we do pick up on these cues. We really feel that physical literacy is the gateway to active participation, that if somebody is physically literate, that they were probably more apt to be active, they'll be active for life. So if they're more physically literate, they're more likely to participate in physical activity, and if they participate in physical activity, they will participate more often, and if they participate more often, they will get fitter, and that's how the cycle works. And interestingly enough, one of the really strong things is that when we have a reasonable level of physical literacy and a reasonable level of fitness, we're more durable or more resilient. And durability and resilience is something we want to have. We want our kids to have. We want our citizens to have. So it's really important that we do feel that if kids are more physically literate, they will be more active. And we want to develop more confident movers. And doing assessment is something that will only help you make your programming better. It'll give you more knowledge. And with that knowledge, and hopefully acting on that knowledge, your programs will only become better in finding that sweet spot. I want to thank you. I want to reinforce where the website is for those of you that haven't seen it. And we have a couple minutes now for questions. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome to ask. And certainly fire away now. If you don't want to ask any questions in this particular session, you can certainly contact Jennifer. And actually, what I will do is I'm going to put my email address in the chat box here, and feel free to drop me a question if you'd like. I live in British Columbia, so I don't know if you necessarily want to phone me, but for anybody that does, in this day of free long distance nationally, you're welcome to do that. That's my cell number, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Jennifer, as she said, there will be an evaluation link shortly. I really want to emphasize to you that if you're going to do programs around physical literacy, I strongly recommend that you have an evaluatory component involved, and that with that evaluatory component, that it's relevant, that it's consistent, and that you use the data. Don't just collect data for the sake of collecting data or collecting information. You need to actually use it. And if you take away anything from today, I really hope that that's what you'll do. So if there's Tony's typing a question. If there's anything else else, I'd be happy to answer that. And as I said, there is a play training session in Aurora this weekend from 12 to 4:30, and it's I have to actually check where the location is, but if you email me, I can certainly give that to you if you're interested in participating. And for any of you that are in Sudbury, I know that's a ways away, and it's thank you, Tony, for that. Yeah, getting one's head around this. I still am constantly trying to get my head around this. Um, you know, we really do have an opportunity to create more confident movers, and we all have a role in it, both in developing structured and unstructured environments for people to develop in. And I think that that's really what's important here is if we do good assessment, we will be able to do better programming as we go forward. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm here for the next couple minutes for anybody that has any questions that they want to type away, or if not, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for your time. I also want to thank Jennifer and Parks and Rec Ontario for their support and their time in helping disseminate this information out to everybody. And thank you, Jennifer and Parks and Rec Ontario.